Welcome to Exo News TV. I'm Michael Sala. I'm very pleased to introduce Craig Campobasso, producer of the short film Stranger at the Pentagon, which is an adaptation of a book with the same title by the Reverend Frank Stranges. Craig's film shows the dramatic circumstances surrounding the 1957 appearance of a highly evolved human-looking extraterrestrial who made contact with the Eisenhower administration. Valiant Thor, allegedly from the interior of Venus, became a VIP guest who stayed at the Pentagon for 3 years, where he discussed a proposal to help humanity prepare to join the galactic community. After the Eisenhower administration declined Thor's proposal for first contact, he sought out private individuals who might assist in realizing some of the less controversial aspects from the perspective of the administration. In 1959, the Reverend Frank Stranges claims he was approached by a Pentagon secretary who had befriended Valiant Thor and was asked to meet with him. Stranges' experiences at the secret meeting at the Pentagon became the subject matter of his 1967 book, Stranger at the Pentagon. Part 1 of this interview covers the material Frank Stranges revealed to Craig Campobasso during their friendship and the circumstances surrounding Valiant Thor's departure from Earth in March of 1960 and his return in March of 1961 during the Kennedy administration. We hope you enjoy this fascinating interview.
Well, welcome Craig Campobasso to Exo News TV. Craig, you've got an amazing story to share concerning your video with Frank Stranges and Stranger at the Pentagon. So why don't you just tell us, basically give us a kind of thumbnail overview of the whole story, Stranger in the Pentagon.
Well, the whole story is about a created being, a man named Valiant Thor, who came to Earth on March 16th, 1957. That was a Saturday, by the way, or at 8 a.m. in the morning, which, when you think about it, that would be the time, if you were going to come, you wouldn't want to come during the week in the middle of rush hour traffic, right? Was met by 2 police officers, was escorted to the Pentagon, where he met with the Undersecretary of Defense, and later on went and met with Eisenhower, Nixon, and the rest of the military brass around noon after everybody was assimilated and brought in. Eisenhower had such a goodwill feeling towards him after he talked about why he came, which was with a divine design to eliminate sickness and disease and poverty and to prolong life. And Eisenhower put him on VIP status for 3 years. This was a Saturday, so I believe he spent the night for 2 nights on a cot in one of the Army office or one of the Pentagon offices there until they were able to arrange a Pentagon apartment for him on Monday. And that was 3 stories down, Dr. Stranges told me. And that was his home for 3 years, but of course he could come and go as he pleased, back and forth to his craft, all that stuff. But primarily he was there, and during that 3-year duration was a time to discuss the proposal, see how to implement the proposal, and if implemented and then proven successful, share it with the rest of the world.
And so what do you know about this proposal? What was in it?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I asked Dr. Frank that same very question. He did not know what the details were of the proposal, and I asked him. I said, I know that over the years you said that you had many meetings with him, and I said you never asked him, and he said, if you understood the scope of who he is and his job, which is overseeing everything that's going on here, even to the degree of job titles and duties that we don't even know or would understand, including raising consciousness, from back then till now, and all the things that we don't know. There could have been disasters that have been averted. There could be all kinds of things. All we can do is hypothesize, but we know that the man is good because he's a created being, and that he is here to help the people of the world, as well as his complement and the rest of the beings in the universe who are here helping with the raising of consciousness. But that gets into a whole nother part of a story that we can come back to later if you'd like. But he said it wasn't that you could ask him certain things like that because it just because his mind was always so heavy with so many things. He said he saw him the first time in December of 1959. He spoke to him some personal things that were in his life, especially about his parents, and that they had a son before him that passed away at birth, and that Dr. Frank was also going that way. And it's interesting to think, you wonder if Dr. Frank actually came in for a mission such as this, and if they had something to do with helping him through even at birth, because he was going the same way as the other baby at birth. And when he brought this up to his parents later on, his mother started crying. And remember, these are full-blooded Italian parents who, and I know because my father is full-blooded Italian, that they're very emotional, and they do guard, the real painful stuff. They don't want to they don't want to have to deal with it because it's so painful. So she started crying and she left, and then his father confirmed it. He also just talked to him about his spacesuit. He let him hold his spacesuit and look at it, and said that the government had tried to penetrate it with a maser, which was the first, before the laser, they had a maser. They tried a diamond drill. They tried dropping acid on it, firing weapons at it, and everything was deflected off of it. So anyway, so that was his first meeting, and then the second meeting came in, I believe, 1961 when he returned, and then they kindled their friendship. And Dr. Frank sort of was the person who was the grassroots operation of bringing all this information forward that was suppressed from that time period when he was there. So, and of course those photographs, were taken by August Roberts, a retired Air Force photographer, at the Menger backyard. The photographs that were taken of Valiant Thor, Vice Commander Dawn. There's a beautiful blonde lady in the photograph as well. She is the wife of Vice Commander Zan, who's also a part of the Victor 1 crew. So he had taken many photos of them that day. And the story goes, he was also a ufologist. He had the largest collection of UFO photographs, and that's why August Roberts and Dr. Frank were friends. Now, this is when Dr. Frank lived back in New Jersey, and the Menger farm was in Highbridge, New Jersey as well. And so after he took these photographs, he had noticed that Valiant Thor didn't have, this is August Roberts, did not have any handprints, fingerprints. He spoke in many languages to different people at the Menger farm, and that when he looked at him, he saw him look right through him. He saw him read his soul history, and it was the most exhilarating and frightening experience at the same time. And he just knew that this man was not from here, nor were the people with him. Dr. Frank also confirmed he had that same experience when meeting him, and did look and see that he didn't have handprints or fingerprints as well. when August took these photos, he called Dr. Frank on the phone and said, told him about the experience. He went to Dr. Frank's house the next day with the photographs, and he asked him, he said, Augie, why do you think these photographs are of people from somewhere else? He explained again about the fingerprints, the handprints, and everything I just said. So Dr. Frank in his lectures blew up that one famous photograph of Valiant Thor, and he had it on his lecture board when he gave lectures. So he would talk about, Dr. Frank always talked about UFOs in the Bible. He spoke about George Adamski's case a lot and had the pictures of the Venusian craft up on his board. And then he added the photograph of Valiant Thor up on the board as well. And interestingly enough, he was asked in December of 1959 to go and do a 2-week speaking at a church there in town. And while he was at this church is when Nancy Warren, who was a high-level clearance secretary, the name is made up, by the way, for the book, she actually, Valiant Thor had befriended her and asked her to go and see if Dr. Frank would be open to coming and speaking with him. So when she went, she pointed to the photograph on his board at this church and said he would like to meet with you. And so she picked Dr. Frank up the next morning, and she's the one who actually brought him to the Pentagon. And they got through the 2 checkpoints and brought him to the office that he was waiting for Dr. Frank in. So all of that was a pretty interesting story. There's a lot more to that, which we will have all the fine details in the big feature film as well, because it's so there's so many great little details that Dr. Frank had told me about everything that went on through there. So it was an interesting journey of him talking about, he would say, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a photograph of a man supposedly from another planet. Here he ends up meeting this man, and then ends up being the person who wrote a small little book called My Friend from Beyond Earth, which was published. It's very rare. It was a little leaflet book in the I think in 1960 or 61, and then he wrote Stranger at the Pentagon, the bigger book, which was released in 1967.
Right. So with August Roberts, were you ever able to track him down to talk to him about his kind of experience with the photos? And Nancy Warren also, were you ever able to track her down to just confirm who she was, what Frank Stranges told you?
Well, Dr. Frank told me that Nancy Warren passed away in the early 90s. I met Dr. Frank in late 2001 or early 2002. August Roberts had passed away as well. I have tried through all of the resources to actually try and find if there were any relatives, or if August Robert was married, or if he had children, and everybody doesn't know. Nobody in the circle there knows. So those trails sort of ended there. But Dr. Frank did, he did give me the photographs that he took that day. I know that there must have been a lot more photographs that he took that the world hasn't seen, and that's what I would really love to see and get my hands on as well. Here's another interesting thing. Do you remember Jim Moseley at all?
I do.
Do you know who he was?
I know who he was. I never met him.
Yeah, and so, he had saucer smear, and he had all kinds of things, and he was actually friends with Dr. Frank. And so Dr. Frank had actually, when I started this journey of writing the script, he connected me to Howard and Connie Menger and to Jim Moseley. And I spoke to Connie. Howard was going into Alzheimer's at that time, and we all know that he's since passed from that. But I talked to Connie, and she said every time they did have an event, there were always visitors there and sometimes they let them know who they were, and sometimes they didn't. She said this particular time they suspected that it was them. There was even a joke that was said, do you think, Howard, do you think it could be them? Which he replied, well, I'm not sure. They're so good looking they could be show people from New York.
Right, right.
But the other, who was the other person? So Jim. When I spoke to Jim, Jim was there that day that the photographs were taken.
Mm.
And in all of the photographs that I have, and I looked, he would have been a young man of about 19 or 18, 19 or 20, and there is a young man there. And I did send the photograph to Jim to see if that was him, and he said, I'm not sure. I said,
Okay.
what do you mean you're not sure? You don't remember what you looked like, way back when? And he said, I really don't know. But anyway, he was thrilled. He was thrilled that Dr. Frank's dream was sort of being realized at that time.
So now, of course, you're making a full feature film about the stranger in the Pentagon. So, just kind of coming back to this proposal that Valiant Thor put together and submitted to President Eisenhower, and I presume Vice President Nixon also had a look at that. That, as far as I can recall, both of them were in favor of the proposal, but that the National Security Council or their advisors overruled them, and it was basically turned down.
Right. It really was the military brass and the Joint Chiefs and CIA and all of that, because really, I mean, if you really think about it, if you go into a society that is now not going to have sickness and disease, and is built on a monetary system like ours, they up there don't have a monetary system because everything is provided for. Nobody goes of hunger, nobody goes of anything, and there is no hierarchy. Everybody is the same. So, interestingly enough, they turned it down because they said it would put doctors, nurses, pharmaceutical companies, hospitals out of business, and that the economy would crash. And so they were looking at it from a monetary standpoint. But I'm sure that there had to have been discussions with Valiant Thor on that, of really how to make a smooth transition out of a monetary system. But then when we have a world that's built on greed and money, we know that that's not going to happen.
So,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So you've made this, I guess, a short, like it runs for about 10 minutes, of Stranger in the Pentagon, and it kind of like dramatizes the landing and some of the kind of meetings, and then it kind of shows Valiant Thor being taken to meet with, I guess you would call them the cabal, the kind of like real leadership. So, how much of that is based on fact, and how much of that is just kind of like part of the, the production process for a feature film?
Well, here's the thing. That's a really great question, and I'm going to give you the really honest answer. I was able to sit with Dr. Frank, and he told me a lot of the stories and everything. So I wrote a draft, and I gave it to Dr. Frank. And he said he was going to give it to Valiant Thor, and then in a couple of weeks, I met with Dr. Frank, and he said yes, the commander, he held the script. He doesn't read, he just absorbed it. And I said, so are there any notes? And he said, well, he just said to tell you, good job. And I said, so there's no notes? And he said, no, he didn't give me any. So I went to bed that night, and I woke up in the morning, and like the rings of Saturn, all these notes and antidotes were swimming in my head. And I had to go to my computer. I couldn't wait to get there to get all of everything that was swimming in my head into the script. And each time I went through a draft, that would happen. So these kinds of things came up during those downloads. So the question is, I don't know, but maybe they are true because they came from downloads from there. You understand? So it's still a mystery, but it's a good mystery in that respect. And of course, a little bit in the end, we have to take a little bit of dramatic license, but the story is there, the spiritual concepts, all of that is there, the thinking of a created being and how they all think and how they all really want to see the earth move into becoming fully conscious so it can join with universal society again. There's a lot of moving things that are in the big feature film, and then we have an incredible summation at the end where everything is today. Which will be really fantastic. So, and I would like to actually, after this, after the feature film, I think it would be so incredible to do a television series throughout the decades, because they've been here throughout all of this, and I have all of the notes and writings of all the things that they did throughout all those years. So we have all this great material for a weekly TV series as well. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of material here, and it covers really a fascinating period in our history. I mean, you actually have the Eisenhower administration, and then you have the Kennedy administration, and Valiant Thor was there kind of like at the beginning of the Kennedy administration. And there's kind of like a very interesting connection there in terms of the Kennedy brothers, which I know you said that Bobby Kennedy actually did meet with Frank Stranges after the assassination of his brother, and that there's a whole kind of story about that. Is that something you'll be covering in the film, or is this something that's just...
No, but that could be covered in the TV series. If we get there, but no, because the film, I had to make the choice that the film just should concentrate on the 3 years that he's at the Pentagon, and then what happens after that. Otherwise, you can't build a story with all these different vignettes of other stories. It just doesn't mesh with it. So we stick there, but let's also not forget to mention that the foreword of Stranger at the Pentagon was done by Project Blue Book's Harley Bird, who was a Navy man who was brought in to Project Blue Book, and he confirmed the entire story as well. And then also we had
maybe you can just explain, how did Harley Bird confirm the whole story? This is the son of Admiral Richard Byrd.
He was the nephew.
I see. Okay.
Right. He was a nephew, and he did a whole. I'm just trying to think of what he wrote. He wrote like a page and a half in the book, confirming I don't have a book in front of me, otherwise I'd read it, but confirming the story and where he was. It even has, it's on the back of the actual Project Blue Book case number as well, confirming his arrival, what happened, things like that, that went with the story. And then, do you know who Major George Filer is?
Yes.
Yes, from the Filer files. Well, George told me that he was a major in, I believe, 1961 at the Pentagon, and this is after Thor had already been gone. And he said that he heard of this man being there at the Pentagon way back when. I mean, if somebody like that's living there, you can only imagine what all the secret talk was. And we kind of hope that there are people left from that era that might be able to come forward at some point and talk about it and see how that goes. So
That's very interesting that Major George Filer actually had heard through the grapevine, the military grapevine, that there was someone like Valiant Thor at the Pentagon. Now, you've mentioned a few times that Valiant Thor is a created being, and in the photos it showed Valiant Thor with two companions, one Vice Commander Don and someone else. So, Jill. Now, they weren't created beings. So, what was the difference? You know, they were just what, Venusians or somewhere?
they're born of man and woman. So they're what we would still call fully conscious, like us on Earth, or dualistic beings. We're not working. Our brain power isn't working at full capacity. So we're still working off of the egotistical, the base emotions of survival and let me try and the me generation, we can say, where they are for all of not only mankind but universal kind. So that's the difference. So their actual heart is what rules their mind. Here, our mind is what rules everything else. Our greed, and of course, not everybody's like that, but that's the main difference. So created beings don't have belly buttons as well. Valiant Thor doesn't have a belly button. There's another created being on board, the Victor One, who's 7 feet tall, who's from Melchizedek. His name is Unaya, and he's out of Melchizedek, and he's a permanent fixture on Victor One. There are also, from what Dr. Frank says, there's under 200 Victor class, the Victor class fleet, which is stationed in and around the Earth, which is monitoring everything that's going on. And these craft are 300 feet in diameter. They hold 200 people, and the main crew is permanent, although every once in a while some of them may go off to go do something else, but they come back. But the rotating crew is about every 3 months. They rotate crews through all the different crafts, so everybody gets an experience, and everybody does different jobs each time they switch out. As well, there's no job that is above or below anybody. So I thought that was a really cool, interesting aspect.
Right. So with Valiant Thor's companions, so did they have like belly buttons and fingerprints and palm prints and all of that?
They have belly buttons, but they also do not have palm or fingerprints.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Dr. Frank explained. He said that that these are markings of dualistic beings that are fully conscious or that don't have markings.
Now, you've mentioned when we've talked before that Valiant Thor actually had something to do with NASA's space program. He gave them some kind of limited assistance or advice. You know, what do you know about that?
Well, the short story that Dr. Frank told me is that he was assisting them because the astronauts were, when they were in the space simulators, they were constantly throwing up, that they couldn't get the suits regulated. So he helped them with the regulation, and I think with some type of medication that they were able to take to sort of have an equilibrium so that they weren't getting nauseous and sick. And I think that's interesting because then we were on the moon in the when we were in the Kennedy, right when Kennedy took office. So I wonder if that had something to do with it. Now, there is supposedly somewhere I've heard that there was a woman who worked at NASA who wrote a book back then who talked of a being from somewhere else doing this very thing, but she did not mention him by name. I'm trying to find out the name of the book and where to purchase it, because I think it'll be an interesting addendum to all of the pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So in the film, basically you're describing the 3 years that Valiant Thor was a guest at the Pentagon, all of the events that transpired with that. So that'll be covered in the feature film. But then in your conversations with Frank, he described what happened when Valiant Thor left Earth in sometime in 1960, and then apparently he came back during the Kennedy administration. So, which raises the question, well, if he was there for 3 years to help President Eisenhower to introduce this proposal that could help humanity in some way to prepare for the space age or the Space Brothers, did he do the same thing with the Kennedy administration?
Well, I never heard that he did from Dr. Frank, but I would venture to say Kennedy was a very open man to things like that, from what I understand from a lot of things that were written, and that he did want to come out and talk about life on other planets and things like that. So I would venture, and this is just me speculating, that yes, that something like that could have happened and could still be happening today, because he's still here.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other very interesting kind of side stories to Frank's recollections of Valiant Thor was that he actually had a meeting with Bobby Kennedy, that Bobby Kennedy came to call in Frank Stranges. This is after the Kennedy assassination, after the Kennedy administration. Bobby Kennedy came in, and that Frank had a message for Bobby Kennedy from Valiant Thor. Do you want to tell us about what happened there, what was going on?
Sure. Dr. Frank at that time was living in Panorama City, which is here in Los Angeles in the Valley. He had an apartment. He received a phone call if he was going to be around on a certain date, and that Bobby Kennedy was flying out to meet with him. And anyway, so he came. He came with, of course, Secret Service men. Two came in the house with him, or in the apartment. He wanted to know if Valiant Thor was real, and he wanted to meet Valiant Thor, and he wanted to know who killed his brother, and if he should run for president in the next election. Dr. Frank explained to him that he would have to write those questions down on a piece of paper, and that angered him. And he said, "I'm sorry, but you have to write it down." So they went in Dr. Frank's office. They typed them up. He put them in an envelope, sealed it. Dr. Frank, the next time he saw Valiant Thor, gave it to him. And then we flash forward to, I'm not sure of the timeline, but we now flash forward into 1968, and the day that Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Dr. Frank received a message from Valiant Thor to drive down to Encinitas, and that he would meet him there. He met him, and then they took a boat way out into the ocean, and they drove the boat up into Victor 1. And this was his first time ever visiting Victor 1, so this is when he got to meet the other vice commanders and crew members as well. They went into Valiant's office, where there is what we would call a sort of, the only way I can explain it, I've seen it in my head, it's like a 5D theater, which would be a very advanced television for us. Right? It's got a depth perception beyond anything we can fathom. So they explain, Teal was with them. It was Teal, Dr. Frank, and Valiant Thor, and they were sitting in Val's office. They were watching it, and they explained to him that this was happening in real time. And when Mr. Kennedy was shot, Val actually had tears in his eyes, and Teal was weeping. And he looked at Dr. Frank, and he said he didn't listen to me. And so evidently he had met with him, and he told him not to run this time around, but to wait 4 years and then to run, and that he might have a chance then. So, but then that brings up the question, did Valiant Thor actually see this scenario? And if he did, he couldn't get in the way of what was to be out of somebody's free will choice. So he could only say what he said. Wait.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
very, very interesting that there was this connection not only with the Eisenhower administration, but also with the Kennedy administration, even though we don't
Yes.
know for certain that President Kennedy ever knew of or met with Valiant Thor. The fact is that he was around at the time, and he had been trying to cultivate the American leadership to embrace or open up to this information.
Right, and I would really imagine that if President Eisenhower, who as we know, really was into knowing all about extraterrestrials and had met, as we've heard, many different races. McElroy actually has done a whole thing on Facebook, I mean on YouTube, that when he was in Eisenhower's office, he actually saw top secret stuff that he had met with extraterrestrials. So there are all these different pieces of the pie, but I would imagine that Eisenhower would have definitely had a conversation with Kennedy about Valiant Thor, right? To say this is a good man, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that would almost definitely would have happened, I would think.
Yes, that's a very interesting kind of issue you raised there, because we know that Kennedy met with Eisenhower twice before he took up the, you know, when he was president-elect, he met with him twice, and that they had private discussions. And then, of course, the day before Kennedy was to take office, Eisenhower basically gave his farewell speech, or a few days before before he left office, he gave his farewell speech talking about the military-industrial complex and the threat posed by that. So that does kind of raise the possibility that, yes,
Yeah.
with Kennedy, he kind of like told really what was going on, that yes, you know, there are ETs here and that they want to share this advanced technology with us, but that the military-industrial complex, the kind of the industrial elite don't want to go down this path because they can lose big profits. And so I've been blocked, and maybe you'll have a better chance than I will. And maybe he encouraged Kennedy to do something about it.
Right. And if I was Eisenhower, I definitely would have coached Kennedy, because we know that Eisenhower really was for the people in all his speeches, and through his compassion when he delivered those speeches and talking about the military-industrial complex a lot, right? And not in a great light sometimes. So
now. You yourself have had some experiences with Valiant Thor, that you actually have had him appearing to you in some etheric form, I think you mentioned earlier. So why don't you just explain what was your own personal experiences with Valiant Thor and how that kind of got you involved in this project with Frank Stranges?
Well, when I was writing the script, I would have the experience of these the vice commanders or Valiant Thor. When I was writing about them, I could feel them put their feeling body inside me, so I could feel on the inside who they were, and it was so beautiful that I would just sit at my computer and cry for like 15 minutes until I could really just acclimate. And when I understood and felt who they were, is how the writing also was a part of it. So I got to have those experiences. On the first day of writing the script, the night before, I did have a dream with Valiant Thor, a lucid dream. You know, it's those dreams where you wake up in the dream and you know it's happening. And he was showing me the outline, the whole thing of the movie of going through the process, the sound stages being shot on, them helping to clear the way of obstacles and things like that. You know, when we did make the short film, everything was just. If I said I need a red camera for free, all of a sudden the next day somebody called and had a red camera and gave it to me for free. It was just those kinds of incredible synchronicities that happen. I mean, like I told you, our the guy who was our master tailor, who created the uniforms, is the guy who did what do you call it? The very first Star Trek movie. He did their costume.
Right. So where do things stand now with the feature film?
Well, right now with the feature film, I am I'm trying to raise $23.5 million of private equity so that we can make the film the way it's supposed to be made. So it'll be from private investors. So I already have the short film is our expensive sizzle reel to show the potential of what we can do with it. The script is ready. The business plan is ready. I have a lot of the key people on board already behind the scenes who are top in the business, including who worked on our short film. Mark Shelton, who was James Cameron's visual effects coordinator on all his movies like Titanic and all, Terminator, all these incredible films. So that's what I'm doing there, and then of course the short film just won another award as well. We just won a Remmy Award at the Houston World Fest Film Festival out of 400 submissions. So that's pretty good. So we've won 2 awards, which is really nice, and gotten a lot of exposure because people really like the story. And I think it's a great story, and it's a really good story to tell because there's so many negative movies written about ETs and aliens, and to have one that will actually give hope to the people, even though the book, on the cover of the book, it says it's based on a true story. I've had these experiences. I have not met any of them in the flesh, but again, it's just based on. It's left up to everyone to believe at whatever level that they want to believe it at. And interestingly enough, gathering all the facts and all the the photographs and all of that. I mean, the photograph of him alone is pretty spectacular. You really feel the energy emanating off of that.
Right. So as far as Valiant Thor is concerned, he is a figure that has been behind the scenes for a number of administrations, the Eisenhower, the Kennedy administration, the Johnson administration. So when we come back in part 2, we're going to pick it up with Valiant Thor and the Nixon administration. And of course, Richard Nixon is a figure in all of this because he was there and witnessed what was going on during Valiant Thor's stay at the Pentagon.
That's right, and he was the closest man to Valiant Thor at that time. Because Eisenhower was really busy with a lot of things, so he sort of was the intermediary a lot, and so he did develop a very good friendship with him. This was, when he was a young man, so it's very fascinating. Of course, and just to remind everybody, if they want to check it out, they can go to strangeratthepentagon.com. They can watch the short film there, and we have all of Dr. Frank's books and all the goodies there as well. So, because Stranger at the Pentagon is going for $70 on Amazon.
Okay, all right.
That's like crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Craig. Well, we'll be coming back in part 2.
That was Craig Campobasso sharing information he received from Frank Stranges concerning the latter's alleged contacts and communications with Valiant Thor. In part 2, we learn from Craig what happened during the Kennedy and Nixon administrations, during Valiant Thor's continued dialogue with US government authorities, and Craig's plans for a full feature-length version of Stranger at the Pentagon.